Hi, this is Stephen from Own or Disown. In this Newegg Now video, I am reviewing the Acer Predator Triton 300. And if you are new to my channel, consider subscribing as I do many in-depth laptop reviews. Now Newegg has two models available. My model, which was on sale for $1,299 but it has gone back up to $1,499, has a 240Hz 15.6-inch 1080p panel, an i7 10758 CPU and an RTX 2070 Max-Q. It ships with a 512GB SSD, but this can be expanded via the two open M.2 slots. It also has 16GB of DDR4 2933 Mhz RAM in dual channel. The second model is currently $200 more expensive and only has a 144Hz display, so you are paying quite a bit more for an extra 512GB of storage and a total of 32GB of RAM. If you can pick up my model on sale, it does represent decent value. And for those undecided between this or the RTX 2060 Helios 300, I would definitely choose the former. You get an all aluminium build that is thinner at 0.78 inches or 19.8mm thick and weighs only 44 pounds 13 ounces, or with a 230 watt brick 6 pounds 12 ounces. You still get the blue Predator logo on the lid, which lights up when powered on, and you get the same Predator boot logo and sound when you turn the laptop on. If you do desire to turn this off, you can do so via the Predator Sense software, along with a 3ms overdrive option, disabling the 30-second backlight timer and disabling the Windows key. The Triton 300 also has a very good panel made by Sharp. At 94% of sRGB, I would be happy to use it for my video editing, and it is reasonably bright even at 25% brightness. Ghosting performance was also very good, so the 240Hz panel is a joy to game on, and unlike the Helios 300's 144Hz panel, it had no backlight bleed issues at all. Even more reason to buy this model over the more expensive one. The panel does have a bit of flex, but the hinges are fairly stiff, the side bezels are fairly slim, and the webcam is up top. So, I think the 720p webcam is actually looking pretty good. The colours look quite good and it looks reasonably sharp. And also this is what it's like when you type. And I'll put on a max fan. You'll notice it'll ramp up and then go quite silent. I think it does a good job. So, yeah, there you go. Not bad at all, I like it. I also had issue with the fans on the Helios 300 as they would pulse up and down. And there was no such issue on the Triton 300. Strangely, the CPU fan is actually made out of plastic, whilst the GPU fan is made out of metal. It has 59 blades that are just 0.1mm thick and have winglets at the top and the bottom to help reduce turbulence. Now it's not silent though, even at idle, but the fan pitch is at least constant. As for fan control, you can either set them at auto, max, or choose a percentage of max for both the CPU and the GPU. Now my max fan is actually quite loud at 55 decibels, so you can reduce this say to 75%, which gives 50 decibels. The fans do quite a good job of keeping the chassis cool. The WASD keys are at 29 degrees and the fans certainly push out a lot of air. You have three power profiles for the RTX 2070 Max-Q. The base mode is normal mode. Fast mode increases the core by 50 MHz and the memory by 30 MHz. And extreme mode doubles this to plus 100 MHz on the core and 60 MHz on the memory. The latter can be activated also by pressing the turbo button on the keyboard, which also turns on the max fan. You do get a slight increase in performance as shown here in the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark, which I'm using ray tracing at medium settings plus DLSS. You'll notice that the extreme performance or the turbo mode increases the power to the GPU from 80 watts to 90 watts. Fast mode sees a 5% gain over normal mode, and turbo sees an additional 7% gain, so it's definitely worth having. Now some games run cool using turbo mode, such as Control and Rainbow Six Siege. It's all depending on how many watts go to the CPU. Those two games perhaps push a max of 32 watts, but as you can see with Far Cry New Dawn at the bottom, 90 watts to the GPU plus 45 watts to the CPU causes the CPU to go over 90 degrees. The original BIOS 1.01 allowed the CPU to be undervolted, which I set to minus 70 millivolts. But unfortunately in games like Far Cry New Dawn, we still saw CPU temperatures over 90 degrees in normal mode with auto fan and turbo mode with the max fan. But setting the CPU at 3700 MHz using throttle stop and setting the fans to 75% speed to reduce the fan noise worked quite well. The latest BIOS is 1.07, which increases the CPU offset voltage by 50 millivolts, and this cannot be overridden. I suspect Acer did this to increase stability. If you do have the newer BIOS, you can still reduce the PL1 values to say 35 watts and achieve reasonable thermals even using extreme mode and a 75% fan. For my testing, I used turbo mode with max fan to show what the system is capable of. Now I did notice that the new BIOS did increase the frame rate in Far Cry New Dawn, so it may well be worth doing. The controller saw some good scaling between the different power modes and could even handle ray tracing set to high and no DLSS. But DLSS is so effective you get the same level of performance as using no ray tracing, so it's a good way to make use of the RTX card. Here's Death Stranding using very high settings, no DLSS, and it runs very well. It's a gorgeous looking game and we are getting over 100 FPS, which is fantastic. I actually compare it against my 150 watt GTX 1080 in my 17-inch desktop replacement laptop, and it is within spitting distance of it. The i7-10750H is also a decent performer. Here I show the effect of undervolting in CINEBENCH R20. Although it gets nowhere near the Ryzen 5 4600H, it doesn't lose performance as you do repeated runs. In long running tests like a 3D render using Blender, undervolting does help it maintain a higher boost clock and thus saving you time. And the same can be said of a 25-minute handbrake encode. Now the underside is made of the same black anodized aluminium as the lid. The fit and finish was very tight, so you may have to use a suction cup to get inside. Now you will notice that it has some decent air intakes on the bottom cover. The 59 watt-hour battery lasted me about 3 hours 20 minutes streaming YouTube at 25% brightness. And you do have some space to the left for a larger battery, but I actually don't believe Acer offer one. The aluminium keyboard deck feels quite premium for its price point, and the Elan trackpad is actually pretty large. It's also smooth and it has quite decent tracking. The keys stand out nicely with the white paint around their edges. It's a 4-zone RGB keyboard with the WASD keys highlighted separately. In the Predator Sense software, you can change the colour of each zone or choose one of several dynamic effects. You have a separate number pad with a button to open up their software. And above the keyboard, you will notice some air intakes. On the left, there is the Ethernet jack and 2 USB Type-A ports, and on the right is a USB Type-C and a USB 3.2 Gen 2, which actually also has power off charging, has an HDMI 2.0 and a mini DisplayPort 1.4. I do wish they moved these video out ports to the rear, as they have here with the power port. It would help keep the cables out of the way. You will notice that the heatsinks are anodized blue, which is a nice touch. Now the speakers do fire down at the front, and I would class them as average to be honest, and good news, it did pass my real-time audio latency test. So how would I sum up the Acer Triton 300? Well, I did really like it. As we approach January, new laptops will start emerging and I expect prices to come down, so keep your eye open for some deals. Like the Helios 300, you do gain some extra performance in turbo mode. Given the choice between the two, I do favour the Triton as it is more refined and seems to have better fans. The display is very nice, it's great for gaming, media consumption and work. It's a shame the new BIOS did away with undervolting, but you do have good fan control, and on the most part, it cooled well enough. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye now.